Start with something called the Terrorism Prevention Scheme. It's a project which identifies people with extreme views and works with them to try and stop them supporting terrorism. The latest figures show that the number of people in Scotland being referred to the scheme has risen by almost a half in the last year. 162 referrals were made in the year ending the 31st of March, up from 114 the year before. The figures show a rise in the number of young people with extreme right-wing views. This is what the police had to say today.
People are raising the right things to the right authorities to ensure that we're able to take action. So that is important to us, and the fact is that we're able to get early notification of someone that may be being radicalised, maybe being isolated.
Maybe wondering, how does this scheme work? Well, I spoke to Lee Doddridge, who's a security advisor and a former member of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office within the police. I asked him whether the rise was caused by more awareness or higher levels of extremism.
I'm hoping it's a bit of both. Obviously, if it was all just purely, a rise in incidents, that would be quite alarming. I would really hope that it's more leaning towards, the awareness and people more willing to report into the Prevent programme when they have either concerns. They don't have to be suspicions, but concerns about an individual, either their behaviour or the sort of things that they're commenting on, or a combination of both. So I'm hoping it's leaning more towards the awareness, and actually looking at the Scotland and the wider UK, that increase in numbers should actually be looked at as a good thing.
When we're looking at who is being referred, Lee, it seems to me there's a number of young people. How much of a concern is that when we are talking about teenagers and youngsters here?
I think we have to be quite balanced in how we view those figures, and particularly within that age group. I think what we need to do is understand that the generation we're seeing now within that age group is completely different when we were that age. And I mention that because it's everything now is that new digital era. But for this generation, that's all they've ever known. So they've got easy access to information that we could never gain when we were that age. I think something we really have to keep in mind, to almost keep a sense check on it, is not that we've got a generation that are more prone to being either radicalised or having some really hardline thoughts on things. It's the fact that they have access readily available through the internet and many other social media sources.
How difficult is it to then try and establish if a person might then become someone who could carry out a terrorist attack?
Oh, it is extremely difficult. You couldn't afford to put individuals in boxes and say, look, they're just looking at right wing, or this individual is looking elsewhere. You have to try and build up as much of a picture as you can. So really, the more reporting that they receive helps distinguish that. We've seen before in the UK, we saw it with the Manchester Arena bombing suspect, where they'd appeared on the radar before and it was disregarded, only later to obviously come to full fruition and carry out the atrocities that we saw in Manchester. And looking back, hindsight is always a great thing to be able to have, but obviously in advance of that, we have to work off that information. And you can imagine the level of work that goes on in the background. I know some people have always been cautious of maybe causing offence if they've reported somebody, but as I mentioned earlier on, that the security services and the police would rather have that report and disregard it than miss a vital element.